But today we've got jobs, money, and the entrepreneurial spirit. So today we'll talk a little bit about just like ways to teach about money at every age. And there's some good books and resources for that. That there's a difference between chores and jobs. And we'll dive a little into what that might look like for you and your family. And then some ideas about fostering that sort of how do I get my kids to work hard or even want to like go do a lemonade stand? And, what are things we can do as parents to kind of just those gentle nudges to help them be thinking in that direction? So, Becky, before we get started, I have a question. Because your kids are like pretty, at least one of them I know is pretty business minded. What did you do in terms of this kind of stuff, like jobs and things when your kids were growing up?
Well, I can't say that I did anything, but my kids were all three of them are in business. All three of them are in tech, which is interesting because I certainly did nothing. I certainly didn't model any of that. Um, that was just, I love little jobs because it gets them out in the world. And even a lemonade stand makes them interact with people. They have to use all their skills. Besides counting money, it's their social skills, welcoming, being polite, saying thank you. All of those things are incredible. And it started for us in 1996 with the Olympics because the whole neighborhood went crazy because the bike race rode through our neighborhood.
Wow.
So that the lemonade stands during the Olympics brought in major bucks. But I'd love to, and then we did all the camps and stuff. But let's hear what you have to say. I'd love to chime in.
Awesome. Well, last year I did, just so y'all know, this is not going to be a full repeat of what I did last year. So last year there was one on money matters, and it was like very specific towards teaching money stuff for kids. But then one thing that I am going to re-reference from that book or from that session is this great book, The Opposite of Spoiled. It just gives such great ideas for helping kids become kind of financially independent, financially savvy, financially responsible. And it's got really concrete takeaways that I have implemented in my own family. And one of them is just giving kids an allowance. And so you can see that actually on the left is our money log book that we have now. But when our kids were little, they had actual dollar bills, like one for give, one for save, one's for spend every week. And I mean, that has been actually one of the biggest blessings in our family that we've used from this book. Did you guys do an allowance or anything, Becky, when y'all were growing up?
We might have tried an allowance here and there, but mostly our kids did get money from um, babysitting, working the snack bar, holding little camps, having their lemonade stands. They got money along and along on their own. And if you go back to that picture with those three jars, I really recommend that. We taught that, and that's how we live our lives. And it took. Our children are all three very generous givers out in the world, have their own charities, give to the church, what have you. And I think that that's something that if you model early on, you're, we always heard this expression, God loves a cheerful giver, not someone that gives because they have to or they feel guilty, but somebody who is cheerful. And I think part of that comes from just expecting that that's part of life.
Well,
It's not like somebody's resistant.
I want to share
Oh,
this video because you said starting early. And so this is me being like a total mom, but this is my daughter when she was still in diapers. I've just asked her the question, who is on the dollar bill? So let's see if y'all can hear what she says. It's just a quick little video. Who is? Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson. You say George Washington. George Washington. That's right. Look, turn around and look at me. George Washington.
How many dollars is $8? $8. That's all right. Put it in your jar.
You started early, Peyton.
So all I'm saying, and it was very cute. So when they were little, it was great to have the money to like touch, and we had 3 jars, and they'd stuff it in. And yeah, she said, "Okay, who's on the dollar bill?" Michael Jackson. Not quite, but I just don't think it's ever too early to start with this. And now, I mean, Becky, like you said, our kids, we still do the give, save, spend, and it has been so great because when we go to the store and they're like, "Mom, I want blah blah blah," I'm like, "Great, buy it with your own money," because they have plenty. They've saved it up, right? And but then we give at, like you guys, every year I ask the kids, "What charity do y'all want to give to in December?" And they all pick their own. And so it's kind of this very special thing that, and then they have saved up too, which is really kind of nice. Because when you start when they're two, it's not, you can really help them save.
That's great. That's so great.
But so some other ideas, just in terms of like when you're teaching your kids about jobs, I always laugh because my kids will be like, "Well, I'll do," and we can talk about this in a second, but like, "I'll do this for this amount of money." Like I'll say, "Hey, who wants to polish the silver?" And they'll say, "Not me." And I say, "Well, I'll give you some money if you want to do it," because it's kind of a beyond a house chore. And they'll be like, "Well, I'll do it for $50." I'm like, "I'm not giving you $50, right?" And so the negotiation of a job is kind of a fun thing as a parent. You can be like, "Well, minimum wage is this. I'll pay you minimum wage." And they're like, "I'm not doing that. That's going to take forever." Right. And so then helping them learn that sort of value of a dollar
Yeah.
is really, I feel like, one of those fun things that you can do um, with kids at any age, right? On the things that aren't just their regular chores.
Yeah. Do you want to maximize your screen?
Oh, yes. Sorry. Thank you.
That's okay. I do think it's really important for children to know that money comes from somewhere and that too many children are today are growing up unaware of the value of money because everything's paid for behind the scenes. And so for them to earn a little bit or have a limited amount or have to buy something for themselves, whatever you choose as a family, there's no one way to do it, but be intentional about it so that children understand that there are costs of things and there are choices to be made.
Yeah.
And I kind of like what Peyton said about negotiating because later in life, my girls read the data about how often women actually negotiate their salaries. And I don't have that data on the top of my tongue, but women rarely negotiate, whereas men almost always do. And so my girls learned early on that when they were applying for a job, that they needed to be assertive and speak out and take that risk. And that's not common for a girl.
No.
And we need to train our girls otherwise, right? To speak up for themselves and know their value.
Yeah. One other idea that a friend told me about that I've used not super regularly, but just like in a fun way to help teach them, like, hey, kind of the value of money. My one of my children, who shall remain nameless, was very bad about bringing her things up the stairs. And I said, I'm if you would like for me to be your personal cleaner upper, you're going to pay me for it. So every item that I have to bring up is going to cost you X. And so it wasn't like a punishment. I wasn't like, "Oh, you have to give me, every time I do this." I just was like, if you're going to expect me to clean up after you after I've asked you not to do that, then the consequence is this. And it was amazing how fast she decided she did not want to pay me for my services that she could do herself. And so that really also taught her a value of money too, right? In some ways, which I always think is kind of interesting.
Well, and my oldest daughter paid my second daughter to do chores for her
Yeah.
from her her own money. Now, that was very bold. She paid her 50 cents a card to send her thank you notes, because she hated writing thank you notes. And that was even at graduation. Her sister wrote her thank you notes, but it was a fair exchange, and the second one accepted the price that she was going to get, the fee. Um, so yeah, kids need to know how to work with money.
Right. I mean, and we do it all the time as adults, right? We sort of offload, okay, what is the thing that I can pay someone else to do that value is good for me? And I do think that's good training for kids, right? Um,
Can
so
I mention one thing?
yeah, yeah.
I what grieved my heart so much was a lost and found at school,
Oh,
which was filled with hundreds of very valuable jackets and sweaters that it eventually just went to a charity because no one claimed them and there was no name in there. When there is a name, they get returned. But so much of that went to charity. And I think there must be a way to teach your child, well, you lost your jacket. You're going to have to buy a new one.
yeah. So on that, Becky, it's you can kind of set some limits. So like with my kids, they really wanted these super swish shoes. And they always want new shoes. It's like every 2 weeks, Mom, can we get some new shoes? I'm like, look, I will buy you shoes when your shoes are grown out of or broken or the tread is gone. Otherwise, you can buy your own shoes. Or that I say, hey, I'm going to give you a $60 budget for your shoes or whatever the budget is, and then anything above that you have to pay. And it is amazing how quickly they start to kind of be like, ooh, well, can I earn some money for those shoes? Or, ooh, I'm going to settle for the kind of less cool shoes because I don't want to spend my money and I don't want to do the work for it. Right.
Yeah.
Um, I do think it's worth mentioning that like kids need chores that they're not paid for around the house. These are
Yes.
things that are just like their routine. You don't have to ask. It's not like, all right, can you please do this? It's like this is just sort of built in. That's building a different type of thing. Building sort of the job and the entrepreneurial spirit. That's where it's like maybe the child leads that and it's by their choice. And it could be things that our family work like, hey, we're all gonna, pressure wash the driveway, or I need y'all to help me stack firewood, but it's paid or maybe bid for, and it won't happen all the time. And I think there's also this sort of like middle ground where it's like sometimes I'm going to ask you as a parent to do something that technically I could pay you for as a job, and it's not your chore, but you just have to do it because I'm your boss. And so that sort of funny middle ground, I think, is where a lot of times my kids will want to negotiate with me. Like, I'll be like, all right, y'all, we really need some more firewood brought up. Can you please go get some? And they'll be like, will you pay me? And sometimes I'm like, well, how much you want? Maybe let's negotiate. And sometimes I'm like, no, it just needs to be done. So I don't know. What do you think about that, Becky?
I think it's a slippery slope, and you need to be really careful um, about paying them to do things. I think they need to be true, um, unique jobs.
Yeah.
And this is obviously an older child. I remember my father paying my brother one summer to wash all the windows on the exterior. That was a real job that he would have paid somebody to do, right? And he paid my brother, and that's an older example. Um, our expression was, it's for the good of the order.
Yeah.
And we all do things for the good of the order to keep things moving. And I think it gives children a wonderful sense of agency and value when they contribute to the working of the household.
Yeah.
They know that that wasn't going to be done. No, it's been done because I did it. Very early on, kids can learn how to make grilled cheese sandwiches for the family lunch, all sorts of things like that. But I think in your mind, come up with some kind of framework about what you would pay for, and
Mhm.
that it needs to be unique and isolated
Yeah.
so that they don't start asking for money just to do the normal things that need to be done in the household.
And it's amazing how my kids, once they have discovered that feeling of satisfaction that comes with doing a job well done and then getting paid for it, they will start looking for other ways to get paid for it. And the first thing they ask is like, well, can I do this chore that I've been doing for free and get paid for it? And I'm like, no, right? Like there are chores and then there are jobs. And I have to do chores at home that I don't get paid for, but I also have a job that I do get paid for. And so that distinction
I
is
see.
super important.
Yes, I think that's really good, Peyton. I love that kind of it's a lexicon, it's a different word.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. So just be careful, parents. Once you start paying your kids for doing work, they're going to ask you for more work to do. And you just have to be careful about those types of limits for yourself. So
How old were your kids when you offered them money? What was the first
ah,
time?
so early, so early. Like we have all different. I mean, it's pretty much anything that they want to, a lot of times I'll offer, like I'll be like, hey, I need these things done and I will pay you $5 if you do it. And they'll be like, how about 8? And I'm like, sold. If it's a lot of times it's firewood because we have a fire and we just go through it a lot. But sometimes it's polishing the silver. Sometimes it's I need you to come help me pick up yard debris. Right. It's like all those little things that I wouldn't, it's not like, hey, can you help me take out the trash? No, that's just a household chore. Right. But as you said, Becky, it's kind of the like, would I pay someone else to do this? Then yeah, I'm gonna ask my kids to do it. And Sarah asked, at what age did you start paying them for doing a job? I mean, little for me. I mean, as you saw, I'm kind of obsessed with this, but like my kids were pretty little. Bond pressure washed our back deck when he was like 7. And I paid him for it, and he was out there for like 5 hours, and it was fabulous. So, I mean, I think it
Yeah.
depends on your kid, but yeah.
I do remember when I was teaching high school in Nashville, part of my job was I had like six 10th graders that that did cleaned up the kitchen. I cleaned up the cafeteria at the end of the lunch once a month. And not one of them knew how to work. I'm sure I've told you, not one of them knew how to use a broom and a dustpan.
Yeah.
Um, I do know that my granddaughter's starting to go to Montessori school at a year and a half, and she will be learning how to use a broom.
Yeah.
Literally, those jobs can start very early. Might not be done well, but they can start very early.
Right. And the good news is like, they're like, oh wow, a whole dollar. Wow. Yes. Thank you, Mom. I think also, especially as kids get older, it's so important to help them start to then kind of develop that entrepreneurial mindset. I remember when I was a kid, I think one of the things that really shaped me is when I was 13, we ran a camp for kids at our house called Camp High Hearts. It was for like 10 kids from the neighborhood, and we had to figure out how much were we going to charge, what were the hours, what were we going to do, how were we collecting the money, and of course my parents helped us. And but we did it every year until I was out of college. And it really, that taught me a lot about like, okay, wow, that was a lot of effort for not a lot of money. Like when I'm kind of that researching compensation of careers, it's like, okay,
Yes.
well, a lot of value, but monetarily not a lot. So like, was that worth my time? And I think that kind of stuff is really helpful for kids too. And they can do
Yeah.
a lot of that when I mean, 13 is pretty young. You don't,
No, I mean, I definitely think watching younger children and getting paid for it is a fabulous thing to do because they are interacting with the parents. They're using all their social skills. I want to answer to Jender's question. I think that's a really good question. How do we make them appreciate resources that are not money,
mm,
water, electricity? And off the bat to Gender, I really think it's you modeling. That's your lifestyle of not wasting any resources. And that includes recycling. That includes turning off the lights in rooms where we are not. And all of that has become obsolete in the 21st century. We were always taught you leave a room, you turn out the light. And that's a good habit just for our world,
Mm.
right? Reducing our carbon footprint in any way is making you mindful of your resources are really everyone's resources, the water, the electricity.
Think too,
Question.
looking at bullet number 4 here, one thing that has really been so interesting is watching my kids' eyes open when they realize the cost of things. So if we say something like, how much do y'all think it costs for us to have water in the house? And then we show them the water bill. And they're like, wait, what? How much did you have to pay in June for our water bill when we were running the hose outside for 25 hours playing in the sprinklers, right? And then also doing comparison stuff. Like, I don't know about y'all, but we get home reports electricity. Like, here's your January report, here's your February report, and it shows you usage and cost and all that. That's like very digestible, I think, for kids. And it's such a fun guessing game because they're like, wait, what? You had to pay this much money for our electricity? And especially when they start to have to pay for things themselves. So that's because a lot of times they're like, well, what's $60 or what's $100 or what's $1,000? They just really can't compute that yet. But one way to build that computation is say, okay, for your friend's birthday party coming up, you've got to go get them a birthday present. We're going to run by Target and you have $20 that you can spend on this birthday present. And then they start to go down the rows and go, oh, I want to get my friend this. And it's like, well, that's $70. Would you like to pay 50 of your dollars? And they're like, no. And so then they can start to kind of calibrate how much are things worth. And that has been fascinating to watch my kids sort of start to understand not just the value of money, but the value of things, and what it's worth and all that kind of stuff. So Becky, do you have anything that y'all did like looking for sales or grocery shopping or anything that, when your kids were in elementary school or middle school that y'all did together?
The one amazingly fun thing that we did for Ellen's birthday and when she was in 7th grade. I mean, this was kind of wild. I think I've told you this before. So she had started a pen pal relationship with a girls' home in South Carolina. And so it was called Sarah's House. And it was across the street from Presbyterian College. And what we did was, this is the time I left Charlie home, but we took 9 girls to Target. We divided them into 3 different carts. We gave them each $20, I think, and a girl's name from the home, her favorite colors, her sizes, and they had maybe it was $30 in 30 minutes to create an outfit to spend those $30 the best they could, run around Target, get an outfit, and then the manager of Target let us have a fashion show and they showed what they had selected for this girl. It was so fun. The girls did such a good job managing the money that we gave them. And then we mailed it all to South Carolina and had an amazing kind of exchange of thank yous and pictures of the girls wearing their outfits. But they understood and they had to juggle those $30 to see if it was worth it buying that little heart necklace, if it was, or the frilly socks or whatever they were buying. And it was a birthday party where my child was not receiving all the gifts. And so we liked that. The focus was on others.
A
It
really
was so
cool
much
idea,
fun.
Becky. I love that. I'm like, I'm going to steal that for sure.
It was so much fun. The kids loved it.
One thing I do want to talk about real quick is there's this fabulous teaching strategy that I learned when I was a teacher called right is right. And I don't know if you have this, Becky, or ever have dealt with this, but my children, I'll be like, okay, they'll say, okay, I'll do this job and I want, $10 for it. And then they'll say, okay, I'm done. And the job is not done well. It's
Mm.
just done. But it's like, ooh, did you like that is like kind of halfway done. So the example I have is with pressure washing. The first time you learn how to pressure wash, it's actually not as easy as it looks because you
Oh,
actually,
it's hard.
right, you can kind of end up making designs instead of actually cleaning. And so when the pressure washing dried, the water dried, we realized like, oh, the job is about 3/4 done. You didn't quite get it all. And so we ended up saying like, okay, bud, well, you did do a job and you spent lots of time doing it, but the job is not complete and it's not done right. So right is right. You need to come back and finish the job and then we'll pay you for it. And that strategy of just right is right is like, come back and finish, come back and do it until it is done right. I think is one of the best tools that we have as parents for making sure our children don't just sort of do the work to get it done, but work hard. Do you have any thoughts about that, Becky?
I I love that. I think as as a teacher, I always struggled with inspiring the children to do their very best. It wasn't an issue in elementary school because I think that elementary children kind of often just do their best because they're excited and they're inspired by it. But later on in middle and upper school, sometimes we see um, a product that comes in that's really not to the highest level. And our expression was, because we're Christians, we said, you work as unto the Lord.
Mm,
And that was the expression we used in our family. I love right is right. Um, I think whatever works in your family's worldview and in that would be something from your heart, maybe something that you learned when you were growing up, but to inspire that um, striving for excellence is important across the board, across the board.
yeah. I think another just in terms of thinking about inspiring, right? We know that kids are always, elementary school students are so great because they're so curious and they've got so much they have a lot of choice, right? It's not like somebody's making them do this. It's like, would you want to try a job, but I feel like as kids get older, they start to look for people outside of us as parents. And so one thing that my husband's parents did, and I know we're about to be off time, but they had him go talk to different business leaders and take them out to lunch when he was in high school. I think he was maybe 16. And so I think just even finding people outside of your home who are entrepreneurs or in business is just one other way that you can start, especially as your kids grow, that you can start to help them develop that mindset of like, oh, well, that's interesting. I'm inspired by that. And as opposed to like, you need to go get a job.
Right.
So,
I love you guys here. We love sharing our ideas with you. Thank you for supporting Food for Thought. Next week, friend drama. Can't miss that.
yeah. Awesome. Well, we'll see y'all next week. Thanks for being here, y'all.